Americans produce more carbon from their built environment than almost any other nation on Earth. 15% of our carbon emissions come from transport alone, and we all know a switch to public transit would inherently be a great resolve for minimizing those carbon emissions from transportation. But how did we get here? Every American city by 1920 had a massive sprawling streetcar network in the nation, but by the 1950s, they were replaced by two new products of the 20th century, the bus and the highway. Why did we ultimately choose these two over streetcars? My name is Tyler Michael Harmon, and today I'm going to share with you the history of the streetcar in America, why it went away due to white supremacy, and what you can do to help levy their reestablishment within America. Starting in 1884 in Cleveland, Ohio, the East Cleveland Street Railway Company operated the nation's first electric streetcar. In the following decades, up to the 1920s, every major American city had a streetcar system. Los Angeles at one time not only had the most extensive system in the nation, it was the best in the world. These passenger railways created civic pride, business districts, and business nodes, helped establish neighborhoods, and created seamless urban and economic mobility throughout many newly formed and developing cities in America. Most of these lines were actually privately owned, however. This privatization would be the streetcar's ultimate demise. Starting in the 1920s, GM, Standard Oil, Firestone, and other automotive and oil companies banded together and started to buy up private streetcars and replace them with buses. By the 1950s, nearly every streetcar system had been bought up and converted to bus. So, how was this racist? Well, for one, America. But two, the policies of the Jim Crow South and segregation led federal and state governments to allow the 1955 Federal Highway Act to bifurcate many American cities where electric streetcars once resided. This act destroyed many BIPOC communities. Many black-owned business districts were torn down in the path for the new freeway systems. Think Roger Rabbit. And many urban barrios and ghettos were economically starved and eradicated by highway racial sequestration. Unfortunately, in America, we see public transit being a government handout or a part of the welfare state. This antiquated outlook, too, is clearly racist and classist, and comes from the same racist time period in America that buses and highways do. Streetcar energy consumption is half of a private vehicle's in kilowatt hours on average, and the streetcar provides this ride at half the energy expenditure of a private car to multiple peoples at once. Streetcars also tie our urban centers and business districts together and form an urban unity, and without them, our grids no longer make sense. Ever wondered why so many parts of Seattle there are those small strips of businesses like on 45th and Wallingford, or 15th on Capitol Hill, or 34th and Madrona? Those commercial strips are remnants of our streetcar networks. As streetcars create fixed points for connection at streetcar stops, these points of connection created permanent fixed financial districts and strips and even entire neighborhoods. Think Georgetown. Streetcars still have this economic power today. So what is our nation doing to reestablish these streetcar systems, or even bolster public transit at all? Hardly anything. The latest spending bill, Build Back Better, only allocates roughly $20 billion in federal resources to public transit nationally. It cost the MTA half that to construct 10 blocks of underground subway on the Upper East Side. Streetcars once tied a young nation together, and I believe can help unify a divided nation today. But what can you, the individual, do aside from pressuring local, state, and federal authorities to act? 1. If you have the option, get rid of your car and start relying on public transit solely to increase ridership, which transit authorities pay very close attention to. 2. If you have the ability, start walking or biking on top of mass transit. And 3. Be madly aware that because of racism, you can't get from the U District to Ballard without a 45-minute bumpy commute that includes a 10-minute transfer outside without covering during a rainstorm. While many Americans are realizing today that truth comes before reconciliation, remember that we have had better, and we can have better again. But our commitment and solidarity is what is needed in order to show how reestablishing our nation's streetcar systems should be a top priority in mitigating carbon emissions and healing the deepest wound of them all in this nation from its original sin. Thank you. Questions?